Welcome back to pregame.tv. I'm your host, Marco D'Angelo, joined by Ken Thomson. We're missing our other partner, Brian Leonard, out this week. He's down at the Las Vegas Hilton. Props are coming out. We're taping this on Thursday night, the week before the Super Bowl. And every Thursday, the LVH here in Las Vegas, most people know them as the Las Vegas Hilton and where the Superbook contest is. They are known for the props. They are the kings. They're the first ones to come out. A lot of the other books copy, maybe, imitate.
Yeah, they'll follow, and none of them will have as an elaborate a sheet as Jay has. I mean, it's ridiculous.
300 he generally.
Yeah, I mean, and he adds to it.
The amount of work that they got to do every year to do those props, and I do the first preview show every Thursday with Scott Spreitzer, and today Jay's on every Thursday, and we're talking to him about the props and stuff, and they're releasing them at 7 o'clock tonight Vegas time, and then they won't actually put the sheets out until Friday, because there's going to, right now they're lining up down at the Hilton. Everybody's waiting, get their shot. As soon as they start putting them up on the board, those guys are going to be running to the windows to take the lines that they think they've got an edge on. And this year, it's such a different animal to handicap, because we're talking about doing it, if you're playing the numbers tonight, the game's, a week and a few days away. You're talking about 9-10 days away yet. We've got weather conditions to deal with this year that is going to impact the handicapping. And I talked to Jay about that today, and I said, because of the weather conditions that are such an uncertainty this year where the location is, are you guys going to do business as usual with the props and the limits, or are you going to come out with the props on Thursday and maybe restrict the limits, and then as we get to next week a little closer, increase the limits? And Jay's exact response was, that would be the smart thing for us to do, but we're going to do business as usual. Right. And they're taking $2,000 limits on all of the prop bets.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing, as far as people that rush in, like, I know Brian Leonard is a veteran handicapper, and he's done this year after year, and he loves the props. So he knows what he's looking at on certain things, and certain things that are not even dealing with the game, but you better be careful. If you're somebody that's just doing it and you think because you're going to get there early and you're going to plunk your money down, you better be careful. You better know what you're doing, because you can get hurt. It's a dangerous time, and I agree with you. The weather. First of all, I'm a Jersey boy. This is the most moronic thing I've ever seen, to have the Super Bowl there without a possible dome, retractable roof. I understand, you want to make it football weather. Well, that's great. What about Vegas right about now? Would be the perfect time to have. I mean, that's why we need a dome, retractable stadium here. You could have every Super Bowl right here on a neutral city.
Yeah. We just need a stadium, period.
Right.
We're bad. We could do a whole nother video on that one. But going back to this game, and the line last Sunday night comes out. Were you shocked at Seattle coming out 1.5 or 2 in most places? Did that shock you, or did it shock you more that once it came out as quickly as it got to Denver -1?
See, I think if you watch the 2 games on Sunday, your initial reaction as a fan, because what do we know is what we saw lately. Okay, we saw Denver virtually play a perfect game. Although they only won by 10 and they let New England get the backdoor on the teaser, Denver still dominated that game. And they played very well against the Chargers. They let them in on the backdoor as well to cover, teasers and to cover the game. I know, sorry. I thought I read that one. That resonated as soon as I said it. But Seattle, to a lot of people, not just Niner fans, but to a lot of people that watched, they stole that game. They were outplayed, but they did play a pretty darn good defensive fourth quarter, came up with the 3 interceptions that they needed. But it did surprise me, with Manning being that guy that's gone to a couple Super Bowls, and Seattle not having one member of their team that's ever played in a Super Bowl. It did surprise me a little.
Yeah, the situation, and this is, again, you talk about, what we saw. The public perception, they just don't believe in Seattle. Both of Seattle's games were, ugly to watch, so to speak. It was, wasn't flashy, but if you've watched Seattle football all year, that's the way they play. They get you into they're going to punch you in the nose and get a dogfight type game. They're not going to put up 40 points offensively. That's what they do. And yes, Kaepernick had the 3 interceptions, but that's what Seattle does. They have defenses that tricks you into making mistakes or put the ball in single coverage. Do you think you've got an edge because you got man-to-man coverage? But Seattle plays man-to-man, on the wideouts better than any team in the league, and that's why they're the #1 defense. If it would have been San Francisco that escaped with the win, got that last touchdown, I think San Francisco would have been a solid 2.5-point favorite in this game because the public perception on the 49ers was much higher than Seattle.
And they were there last year.
Absolutely. And that's the one knock that we've got going with Russell Wilson. I love Russell Wilson, and I know he doesn't have the gaudy stats, but, he reminds me of this team, the early Steeler teams when the dynasty, when they had the defense. It was the defense that carried the Steelers. Just go out there and just do enough. Don't, let us control the game. Do what we need to win. We saw that the year Trent Dilfer with Baltimore. Dilfer didn't put up big numbers, but it was able to, drive the bus, so to speak, without wrecking it. I look at this, and one of the things that Jay said, and the question I asked him, as I said, when you guys opened the line 1.5-2 on Seattle, the initial money coming in, was that sharp money or was it public money? And his response was 75 to 80% of the bets coming in are coming in on Denver. And most of the early money that we saw was all public money running to bet Denver. He says what he thinks is happening is then the sharps took a look and saw this at 1 and saw the way it was going to head. They jumped in then to try to grab the 1s and ended up driving the line up even more. But they want to get Denver -1 because if this thing continues to go and it hits that magical 3, he believes when it hits 3, and he does think it will, but it won't stay there long, that you're going to see then the sharps also playing a position. They're going to come in and storm the Seattle plus the 3.
Yeah, it makes sense. And here's the thing. The more and more you break the game down, I mean, Seattle plays to their strengths, like you said. And Russell Wilson's not a weak link. He's very solid. Sure, he got sacked 4 times against San Francisco, and we know that's probably the best defense, all 11. Seattle's secondary is the best in football, hands down. There is no doubt about that. They are good enough to cover one-on-one. But there's a lot of people that feel like Seattle's a man-to-man defense. They're not. They really play a cover 3. They play a lot of zone. And then they have a couple guys like Sherman and Maxwell that will get up and play while the rest of the guys are in zone. They'll play that man-to-man and get up on the receivers. But I think, Denver's got an elite core of receivers, and bringing Julius Thomas into the mix gives them that tight end. Although Vernon Davis was taken out of his game, it's still, you've got to rely on a good, solid cover guy to take away Julius Thomas. You've got Wes Welker, who's got Super Bowl experience, that finds a seam in his zone better than any receiver in the game.
Now, obviously, a lot of talk coming into this season, Manning, when you get to the big games and the problems that he's had and the cold weather. And me and you talked off camera before we set up that, that's a misleading, myth with, the numbers are there. But remember, if he's playing in cold weather, all those years he played in a dome, okay, not the fact that he can't play outdoors. If he's playing in cold weather, that means he's playing on the road,
right?
Okay, because they don't have cold weather.
Playing on the road and playing against a great New England team. Now, we talk about New England being a dynasty. I don't agree with that. They've lost their last 2 Super Bowls. They haven't done anything since 2005. But you may have had a short, compacted dynasty there to where they won their 3 Super Bowls. They got there. They had home field. They were just better than my Colts. I love that the Colts got there, but I knew we were in trouble because Brady was at the top of his game, but so was the defense. They had a pretty good defense. They weren't household names, as good as the 49ers were back in the day, and they won the Super Bowls. Everybody talks about Joe Montana, Jerry Rice. Those defenses were pretty darn good back then, too. But again, they're overshadowed by the offenses. Same thing with those great New England teams. They beat the Colts. Look at what Manning did this year, or, late in the season. 19-degree weather, threw for over 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's not intimidated by the cold, and I think it's an advantage for him that he did play in Denver. Seattle, yes, they have inclement weather, but a lot of it's rain. It very rarely gets really cold there. Denver, Manning played several games in the cold weather and did very well.
Yeah. A couple points, and then we're going to get out of here on this video, and we'll be back next week when we'll actually break it down and give our, give some picks on the game and maybe some prop bets. But for me, I'm waiting to make a decision till I know a little better with the weather conditions, because it is gonna affect my handicapping. But a couple points I'm gonna make. The one asterisk that you can't ignore if you're looking at Seattle is Russell Wilson. Again, I love the guy, but this will be the biggest game of his life. And I can tell you that, history has shown that a lot of times, a young quarterback getting to the Super Bowl quickly, it doesn't pan out well. My Steelers had to get, Cordell Stewart. One of the biggest bets I ever made early in my career was the Super Bowl, Dan Marino against the 49ers. I was all over the 49ers. I thought it was like stealing. And poor Dan never got another chance.
Yeah.
That's some history to overcome. But another history, though, that favors Seattle is when you get the #1 defense in the Super Bowl, history has shown they have won the Super Bowl, more than not. And we definitely have that. But the league has changed. It's become more of an offensive league. But how funny, the playoff games that we saw the last, couple weeks, it hasn't been shootouts. It's been the defenses that have won the games. In Denver, as efficient as their offense has been the last couple weeks, Denver didn't put big numbers up on the scoreboard. They put numbers up in the stats, but it didn't translate on the scoreboard. So it's going to be an interesting matchup. The last point I'll throw to you, people are looking that New Orleans came back on Seattle, made it close at the end after digging himself a 16-0 hole. And then, of course, last week's game was San Francisco. I mean, as Steve Fezzik likes to say, it was a coin flip game. Could have went either way. The one thing I'll point out, advantages for those two teams that faced Seattle, is that was the second time the Saints were facing them this year, and it was the third time San Francisco was. This will be the first time Denver faces them.
Yeah, well, they actually did play. It's funny because they played in the preseason game.
Yes.
No, but when they were playing that game, and Seattle destroyed Denver in that game, and I just said, I could see this as prior to the game, I could see this as being the preview to the Super Bowl. It wouldn't surprise me that both these teams got there, and they both did. Again, I thought San Fran, the way they were peaking, was good enough to beat Seattle, but I know it was their 4th straight road game, so it didn't surprise me that Seattle won. Denver taking care of business as handily as they did against New England. Again, only winning by 10 points on the scoreboard, like you said, but they could have put up another 15 points if they needed to. They took time off the clock on all those drives. They were very efficient drives and very well thought out by Peyton Manning. And that's the other thing we have to look at. Peyton Manning, to me, he's an animal like nobody else in the game. He is an offensive coordinator out there. He can audible. Now, Richard Sherman is a good young guy that also reads and is very cerebral as well out of Stanford, and he reads the offenses. He's going to try and counter what Manning does. But Manning's been doing it a lot longer. Again, if the wind comes into play, that's the only thing I don't want to see. I don't want to see where Dan Fouts has to go to Cincinnati and try and throw the ball against a 30-mile-an-hour wind. That'll suck as far as for the fans as a whole. I think it's going to be a great game either way. It's going to be, like you said, best defense, best offense. 4 times that's happened in the Super Bowl. 3 times the defense has won out. 1 time, though, was your Steelers in a 35-31 game, so it's not like they shut Dallas down.
Yeah, that's a game that Vegas doesn't want to talk about.
Right.
That one.
And it was a great game. It was an outstanding game.
Black Sunday, as it was called here. All right, he's Ken Thomson. I'm Marco D'Angelo. Now, we'll have videos next week. We'll be talking all kinds of stuff with Super Bowl. We'll have several Super Bowl videos talking over-unders, prop bets, everything else. So stay tuned to pregame.tv right up to Super Bowl kickoff. We'll have everything for you here. Have a great weekend. Cash some tickets. We'll talk to you next week.
Good stuff.